Keeping you informed, involved, and in touch. This is News 3 at 6.
On News 3 at 6, our continuing coverage of the U.S. under attack. Buildings rattle around the country as an orchestrated terrorist attack hits the U.S.
There is heightened security across Madison as contingency plans are made for the potential of terrorist attacks here.
The Dane County Airport were not only planes grounded, but also diverted to Madison.
America remains in a state of shock tonight after the worst ever terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Good evening, everyone. I'm Katie Sy.
And I'm Mark Kane. The terror started just before 8 o'clock this morning, Wisconsin time, as a hijacked plane crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. About 18 minutes later, a second hijacked plane crashes into the other World Trade Center tower. Roughly 40 minutes later, a third hijacked plane crashes into the Pentagon. Government buildings in Washington, including the White House, were evacuated. The FAA shut down all aircraft takeoffs nationwide. Just after 9 a.m. Central Time, one World Trade Center tower collapses. About the same time, a fourth hijacked plane crashes about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. The second World Trade Center tower collapses at 9:28 Central Time. 10 minutes later, a fourth explosion rocked the collapsed remains of the World Trade Center. Later this afternoon, number 7 World Trade Center, adjacent to the Twin Towers that collapsed this morning, also came down. President Bush has vowed to do whatever is necessary to keep Americans safe.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
And the effects of this tremendous act of terrorism are felt all the way here in Madison.
News 3 has several crews following this story. We begin with anchor John Karcher, who is fielding our coverage from the state capitol. John?
Katie and Mark, if we were horrified at what happened at Oklahoma City when 169 people died, what are we tonight? This is beyond belief. It's the most horrific attack ever in the United States. And tonight, still no clear answers as to why or who and how many people are dead, but it's likely to be in the thousands. As soon as the Twin Towers went down, reverberations were felt across the country and here in the capital city. Police and deputies in Madison tightened up security. The Dane County Airport took in 5 planes and hundreds of passengers who had to come here when their planes were forced to land. And the state mobilized its defense to protect all of us. News 3's Tony Morrissey joins me now. She's been at the Capitol all day watching the events unfold on the state government level. Tony?
Well, John, anyone walking by the state capitol will see this. Security vans at every entrance to the state capitol with state capitol police nearby. It's all part of the state's emergency action plan. Capitol police officers stationed themselves at all access points into the state capitol. These were the first signs of the heightened state of alert.
Today, there's been a vicious, cowardly attack on America, and an attack on America affects us all very personally.
The governor met with reporters after briefings by military affairs officers and other state officials.
I'm confident the appropriate steps have been taken to protect our citizens and our facilities.
For the National Guard, it's the highest state of alert in recent memory.
This is essentially a cease of operations, of flying operations. This is a heightened a level of security and awareness and vigilance at all of our armories, and normal operations have essentially ceased.
Despite the added security, it's business as usual for many state capitol workers.
It's still a work day. People can leave and workers can come and go. It's just that we're having one point of entry in the buildings.
The security is also in place at other state office buildings. The governor toured the Department of Workforce Development. 2 crisis centers are in place for the hundreds who work here. The mood is one of utter shock.
I expect in a few days we'll start seeing people realizing how terrible this situation is. Right now people are very much in shock, and those who have friends and family out east are focusing on that and feeling helpless.
Now, News 3 has learned the Capitol Police will be on alert all night at every access point around the Capitol. And John, extra officers have been called in for that all-night vigil.
Tony Morrissey, thank you. The Army and the Wisconsin National Guard, as Tony said, are on their highest alert possible. Inside the National Guard headquarters, the state has also activated its Emergency Operations Center. Dozens of officials from state agencies are monitoring the news and coordinating resources in case of an attack. The governor checked in earlier today while the National Guard implemented its highest level of security possible. It's being called ThreatCon Delta.
It's force protection. It's to protect our people, facilities, and the military assets that are entrusted to us. It has nothing to do with the likelihood that we would be deployed.
Security measures are being tightened at 3 Wisconsin Guard air bases and over 60 facilities statewide. Now, the Madison Police Department and several other agencies were put on heightened alert earlier this morning. News 3's Joel Despain joins us now with that part of the story. Joel?
John, officers are doing all they can right now to ensure that all of us here in Dane County remain safe.
Headline news, Cap Times, terrorists strike U.S. Read all about it.
It's hard to remember the last time newspapers hot off the press were hawked on the Capitol Square. 2 teens now have grave concerns for the future of their country.
And for the future of the world, the future of what's going on outside of our borders, the future of everyone out there who's going to be brought into this, the future of everyone that has to deal with this.
The day started off with flags at full staff and extra police officers being called to duty as special units like the bomb squad and SWAT teams go on alert.
There are meetings right now with the upper level managements of all the departments, and they're talking about what's going on and any contingencies that we may have to deal with. We're urging people to be calm and don't get all nervous and concerned and start get panicking, because that's obviously what the goal is probably from the terrorists is to get worldwide panic.
Many entrances to public buildings are under guard and shut down. Those wishing to enter must do things like provide ID. Some officers wonder if any of this would really make a difference.
It's really difficult, as you know, as we talked about, very difficult to protect against terrorist attacks of this nature when there are apparent suicide attackers involved. But we're in shock, obviously. Everybody here is in shock.
It's scary from the standpoint that they didn't foresee this coming. And I've been listening to the report, and I'm just like how something like in just a split second, how your whole life, everyone's life in this country is going to be changed.
And as most have probably noticed, John, flags across all of Dane County are now at half staff.
Joel Despain, thank you. County leaders wasted no time trying to keep everyone calm today. The mayor, the county exec, the police chief, the sheriff, as well as UW Police and System President Catherine Lyle all held a joint press conference. All expressed shock and outrage at today's events. Considering the UW campus is such a melting pot, campus leaders are concerned students remain calm.
It is a concern for us, and we will be in touch with our international students to try to reassure them that this is not an environment in which they need to be fearful.
Of course, fear might have started in everyone this morning when they ordered every plane that's flying out of the sky. That meant trouble for Dane County people trying to get out of our airport. And it also meant some unscheduled planes coming in as hundreds of passengers sought refuge from the sky when no one knew what was happening next. Our Linda Eggert has the very latest from the Dane County Airport. Linda, when do you know about flights leaving here in Madison? When will it be safe again?
Well, we have some new information we got late this afternoon. Obviously, you can see behind me the planes here still grounded, will be through tomorrow. But what we're hearing the latest is that there could be flights resuming as early as 11 o'clock our time tomorrow morning. 11 o'clock our time tomorrow morning is the latest information we have. However, here's the hitch. Even if they do, things could continue to be hectic. That's because airlines have to track down their planes and get flights back on track. Bottom line, you should call the airline or check the airport website before you show up tomorrow. Now today, hundreds of people from 5 flights diverted here to the airport. Some were happy to be alive, others were in shock.
It's really scary to think that our country can actually have this happen. You kind of don't think it'll happen to you, and you think you're really protected, but you're not.
I think everybody is really moved over seeing this, and it's a terrible catastrophe that went on, and I think when we start to hear how many people have perished on this, it's something you'll never forget.
The situation here is really shaken up airport workers too. I mean, they're in a complete holding pattern and they're dealing with something they've never seen before. Again, the airplanes could start taking off tomorrow around 11 or possibly noon our time, but officials are saying don't hold your breath. You can try to rebook your flight. Don't count on a new flight anytime soon. If you're scheduled to fly out tomorrow, probably best to call the airline or check the airport website. The number should be on the screen at msnairport.com.
All right, Linda Eggert live at the Dane County Regional Airport. Thank you for that update. We're at the Capitol. Life is normal here. People are walking their dogs. The buses are rolling. Anything but normal in this country tonight, Mark and Katie, as we witness what will go down as the worst attack on us ever. Tonight at 8 o'clock, President Bush will address the nation, and News 3 will, of course, be with CBS throughout the evening and overnight, nonstop as we continue to cover this event. Back to you.
John Karcher, along with Tony Morrissey, Joel Despain, and Linda Eggert, thanks to all of you.
U.S. lawmakers in Washington will be going back to work tomorrow morning after being evacuated from their offices today. I spoke with Congresswoman Tammy Baldwin this afternoon, just moments after she had spoken with congressional leaders.
We got news of the explosion at the Pentagon, and rapidly at that point, many people began to leave the Capitol Hill area on their own, and then, of course, there was an evacuation order for the U.S. Capitol building and the House and Senate office buildings, and we left at that point.
I have to imagine at that point that was pretty scary.
It was. Clearly there were many people who were quite frightened. I saw many running out of the building. But everything was orderly nonetheless, and people basically made their way off Capitol Hill, and most of them to their apartments and homes in the area.
You send that tomorrow. Congressman Baldwin says both the House and Senate will return to the floor at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to pass a resolution concerning today's tragedies. And while tomorrow's focus will be to address today's attacks, the following day, Thursday, lawmakers are planning to return to business as usual.
First Congressional District Congressman Paul Ryan and his staff, along with the rest of Washington, of course, evacuated today. I spoke with him this afternoon about his reaction to today's horrific events.
First reaction is to pray for the victims and their families. The second reaction is horror and disbelief. And I just feel very strongly that we need to unify. And we're a strong country. We're going to survive this. We're bigger than this. And we will overcome this act of terrorism.
Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold released this statement concerning today's events. I'm horrified and outraged by today's terrorist attack on New York and Washington, D.C. I want to express my profound sympathy for families and friends of those who were killed, missing, or injured. I have every confidence that our government will conduct as swift and thorough investigation as is possible. The perpetrators must be identified and they must be held accountable. The forced responsibility for this attack have achieved nothing. We will refuse to surrender our security, our values, and our way of life to those who would have us live in fear.
A number of government buildings were evacuated as a result of the attack on the Pentagon. News 3 has been in touch with HHS Secretary Tommy Thompson's family. His daughter, Tommy, told News 3 that she did make contact with her father this morning. He told her he's fine and has been busy today orchestrating medical help to be sent to the New York City area. And of course, now questions are all that we have left.
And here to provide some insight and perspective for us, two folks from the UW political scientist Don Kettle and Professor of International Affairs, Michael Barnett. Thanks for joining us tonight. First of all, we keep hearing the name Osama bin Laden. Isn't it a little too early to be coming up with a suspect already? Are we jumping the gun?
I think that's right. I think before we have a rush to judgment, we have to remember in Oklahoma City where there was a tremendous assumption of who must be responsible for that tragedy. And of course we all found out that this was actually homegrown terrorism. In the same way, I think we have to be careful about rushing to judgment with regards to who might be the perpetrator of this act. At the same time, though, as you begin to sort of run through the list of terrorist organizations and terrorists that are capable and are willing to mastermind and carry out this kind of attack, the list shrinks mightily. And it's clear that Osama bin Laden, along with some others, must be considered as part of that list of suspects.
The scope of this attack today is almost mind-boggling, how this is all orchestrated. It has to be somebody who knows what they're doing.
Somebody or some number of people. I think as you begin to try and imagine who might have carried this out, it's not just simply one person, but it could be one person coordinating a number of different terrorist organizations. It could be one person who is getting assistance from a state and helping them provide either monetary support or military logistical support. So we have to keep an open mind about who and what number of people are involved in this attack.
Is there some reason authorities are not more strongly focusing on a possible domestic attack, like the Murray building?
Well, I suspect they are focusing on lots of different possibilities there. And while they're not being forthcoming about everything that they're doing behind the scenes, I have no doubt that the intelligence services right now are scurrying to identify not only who might be involved, but what might be other attacks that might be planned that were not carried out.
Don Kettle, today I think it just shocks us all. This has rocked the foundation of our country, of our freedom. We've never seen anything like this before.
We never have, and you know, it's just impossible to underestimate just how wrenching an event this is. The personal tragedies are huge, but this is the kind of event that could very well shape the way that we think about our role in the world for decades to come. It is just impossible to underestimate this. People have compared it to Pearl Harbor. I think that's no exaggeration.
When we hear from the president tonight, what do you expect him to say?
It's difficult because he's in a position of having to reassure us and to tell us that, yes, we still have a strong national control, our command apparatus is in place, we have leadership, we're shocked about what we've seen, we sympathize with those who have lost loved ones, we're going to try to intervene as soon as we find out who's responsible for this and make sure it doesn't happen again. But he has difficulty being able to say too much because we don't know a whole lot, and the fragmentary things that he does know, he may be reluctant to say publicly at this stage. So it's a very hard speech to give, but surely one of the most important that he ever will give.
Michael, in terms of worldwide and other countries, they're of course going to have sympathy for us. How do you expect the rest of the world to react to this?
For the most part, there will be, I think, uniform condolences and outpourings of sympathy with regards to what's taken place now. I suspect that there will be some people, some governments that will believe that while we didn't have this coming, there may be a sense that United States are not immune to this kind of terrorist activity. And while no other country has actually suffered this kind of a terrorist attack, many other countries have themselves dealt with this on a daily basis. And so there may be a sense that the United States now may have a greater appreciation for the threat of terrorism and the kinds of consequences it wrought.
For both of you, we're hearing an awful lot of tough rhetoric. We will hunt down those responsible and punish them. How realistic is this?
Well, these are reassuring words in sort of very emotional times, and I have no doubt that these are said very deliberately and very carefully and very sincerely. There's a long trail between those words, though, and being able to identify and apprehend and bring to justice those who are responsible for this. I suspect it'll be not just simply days, but weeks, if not months, before we have a clear idea about, the trail of evidence and to whom it leads.
Don, you're on campus today. These students, this generation has never seen anything like this.
We have a group of students now who's never seen anything remotely like the kind of wrenching event that we saw today. For many of us, the only thing remotely approaching it in our lifetimes may have been perhaps the Kennedy assassination. Only a handful of people alive will have remembered Pearl Harbor. Today's students just are shocked by this, and they're spending a lot of time talking in small groups, wanting to try to discuss the events in class, trying to figure out what the implications are. We have a group of students that's really grown up in a lot of security with a sense that economic stability would be there to count on, and now this really rocks the basis of a lot of what it is that they've come to expect. Matter of trying to figure out how to deal with this. I had a niece who came home from elementary school in Washington area, looked up and saw military jets flying over her house in a way that she never would have expected. So this is a kind of earth-shaking event for all of them.
All right, stick around. We'll talk to you a little bit later on. Thanks for coming out today.
Thank you for your perspective. When we return, what the Red Cross is doing to help victims of today's attack and how you can help.
The Red Cross wants people to hold off on giving blood due to the high amount of donors that have already come in today. But first, before we get to that story, here's Tommy Thompson.
Victims of today's tragedies and their families. It is now our mission to begin the healing from this tragedy. From the moment that we learned of these attacks, the Department of Health and Human Services has begun readying teams and resources to be sent to New York City and the Washington area to meet any needs of state and local officials. So far, we have sent 4 disaster medical teams to New York City and 3 of these disaster medical teams to the Washington, Northern Virginia, Baltimore area. These medical teams each consist of about 35 physicians, nurses, and emergency medical technicians. They are all trained to deal with traumatic injuries and other emergency needs. We've also sent 4 disaster mortuary operational response teams to New York and 3 to the greater Washington area. We're also in the process of shipping a great deal of emergency medical supplies to New York City with the help of the Centers for Disease Control. In short, we're making the full force of the Department of Health and Human Services, both its resources and medical expertise available to the areas that need our assistance. We've also this afternoon activated the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, which consists of approximately 6,000 health professionals. We also are giving backup assistance to the 500-bed ship Comfort from the United States Navy. Americans all over are calling up and asking what they can do. The best thing they can do is respond to this great call by volunteering to give blood. We need Americans to continue to answer that call. No matter where you live, please do your civic duty and assist us by donating blood. It is our primary job is to make sure Americans harmed by this tragedy get the help that they need. We will remain in constant contact with the governors, the mayors, public health officials, and other local officials to make sure that all their needs are being met. It is a sad day, but America and all of its citizens certainly share tonight in the grief that it's been caused. And as the President and everybody in his administration have said, we, the government, will continue to operate and continue to provide the services to all Americans.
That is Health and Human Services Secretary Tommy Thompson speaking from the White House about the U.S. medical efforts to help those tragically struck down in New York and Washington.
And while the Red Cross does want you to give blood, donors have been streaming into the Red Cross centers on Sheboygan Avenue since early this morning. So we're being told that you should hold off at this point. Kevin Masello of Madison came to donate because he wanted to feel like he was doing something to help the victims.
I think emotionally people are just struck by what has happened. I think in the past they've felt not in touch with things that have happened, whereas this is such a big tragic event they can't help but feel in touch with what's happened.
Red Cross officials say blood supplies are at high levels right now, and they ask you not to call their hotline until Thursday because of the high demand for giving. However, they expect they will need even more donations over the next few days. Meriter Hospital is standing by to help out in today's disaster. Both Meriter and UW Hospital are part of a national disaster medical response system. That means those injured in New York or Washington could be flown to Madison for treatment.
We've already been contacted by the Milwaukee office, just putting us on alert and making sure that we were taking necessary steps to be prepared, and we definitely have done that.
After counting available beds and organizing staff, Meriter spokespeople say they're able to take in 150 patients in a 24 to 72-hour period.
For those of us here in Wisconsin, it is hard to imagine what it's like right now for people in Washington and New York. In a phone conversation earlier today, Christine Russell, a WPS lobbyist living in Washington, told News 3 the day seemed unreal.
Again, having lived here for so many years and knowing this city, I pinched myself to think I must be dreaming. And now, again, I can't explain how eerie it is to look out and to see these few people out on the street.
And people in New York and around the country are trying to make sense of this tragedy and looking for a place to grieve. Within hours of learning of the attacks, people began leaving their offices and homes, looking for a place to receive some level of comfort. For that part of the story, we turn to Katrina Wright, who joins us from the News Center. Katrina.
Well, religious leaders have worked all day to open doors of churches, temples, and synagogues. That's because so many people are turning to others to cope with this tragedy. This morning, the gates of Heaven Chapel began filling with nearby residents. People from various denominations showed up, and religious leaders of different faiths said a few words, hoping to comfort those in pain. Everyone here is dealing with this crisis in their own way. Most here simply wanted to say a prayer for the families who have lost loved ones.
What else can you do? I think there's so much tragedy, so many families in tragedy today. And what else can you do but pray for them?
Now, there are dozens of prayer services planned around the area tonight. For a complete list, you can log on to channel3000.com. We'll continue to update those locations throughout the evening.
Katrina Wright live in the News Center. Thank you.
United States veterans have seen their share of tragedies, but never anything like today's attack. Those at a local VFW hall watched the breaking news in horror. Veterans here say the attack closely resembles the one on Pearl Harbor 60 years ago because of the sudden blow and the massive number of lives lost.
We should continue on and find out who's causing these problems, because if it keeps up, we're going to lose. We're going to lose civilians that shouldn't have died. Those people on those aircraft that died, there was no reason for it. Pure, stupid murder, as far as I'm concerned.
At this point, it's estimated today's attacks took more than 10,000 lives.
Well, Gary Canalti, it was hard to pay attention to class today on UW campus. Students spent a lot of time in front of the TV or near a radio trying to get caught up with what was unfolding halfway across the country. UW, being the melting pot that it is, has many students, faculty, and staff who call Washington or New York home. They're scrambling to make contact back home. Others are just trying to make sense of it all.
My alarm clock went off, and it was the first thing that they said was that the World Trade Center had been crashed by one plane. And I went downstairs to eat breakfast, and the whole building was down there, and the second building got crashed into at the time. And we watched it live, and it was shocking. And in class, we heard the Pentagon got bombed as well. And it's pretty scary. A lot of lives have been lost. My heart goes out to all those families. It's really scary. I'm glad I'm not there right now.
The UW did issue an email today to all staff saying classes would be held, and the UW felt there was no imminent danger or reason to cancel classes.
In a minute, we shift gears. Gary Canalti will take a look at tomorrow's local forecast in a minute. Please stay with our expanded News 3 at 6 coverage of the U.S. under attack.